Southern Fried True Crime covers cases that are not suitable for young listeners, and there may also be some explicit language used. Listener discretion is advised. I woke up this morning and my phone was missing. I sleep with my phone, like I use an app for white noise and an alarm. I asked Ava if she had my phone and she said no. I heard some creaking around at 4 to 5 a.m. this morning, but I thought it was Ava and I rolled back over. I'm totally creeped out. I know I forgot to set my alarm last night. I was so tired from 3 hours of dance that I think I forgot. I don't know how he could have gotten in and me not notice. So I look around everywhere for my phone. I always unplug it after my shower and poke around in it while I air dry. It was not there after my shower. I know I woke up on time, but I don't remember much else. So I looked everywhere around my house and didn't see it. I got to work and checked my emails. My Gmail has been messed with. All my emails to my lawyer were erased, and all from my mom. So I think he has my phone. I had it turned off. Oh my God, I am still so creeped out if he snuck in and got my phone while I was sleeping. Welcome to episode 37, The Stalking and Murder of Heather Palumbo-Jones. I just read you an email sent by Heather Palumbo-Jones to her cousin Diane Perry on April 12, 2013. She vanished from Germantown, Tennessee on April 16th, and her severely charred corpse was found on April 23rd in Shelby County. As we start the new year, new resolutions, and new diets, Heather's case spoke to me. I had researched it a year ago and then put it down. It's not that it's any darker than any other cases I've covered, but every time I went to write it, I found myself depressed. Mainly because Heather was such a positive person, despite her ugly marriage. She had gone on a weight loss journey and was reclaiming her life when she was murdered. And it was just 4 months after she left her husband, the most dangerous time for victims of domestic violence. Fat shaming is a particularly insidious form of bullying and discrimination, and I think Heather Palumbo-Jones was a victim of it both before and after her death. It's always important to me to keep domestic violence cases in the forefront. Heather's case was a listener's suggestion, but one I had heard of and remembered well because I've always seethed about the narrative that surrounded her murder. Her case was extremely publicized due to the fact that she lost over 150 pounds before her murder. Typically, domestic violence cases are underreported in the media because they are so depressingly common. Evidently, weight loss made Heather's murder remarkable for the mainstream press. There are other salacious aspects of the case that would make headlines, like her estranged husband being charged with abuse of a corpse. There was also another man in the picture, though the relationship was barely a month old and irrelevant. But most headlines of the time all focused on Heather's weight loss. Dr. Oz hosted a segment interviewing Heather's friends titled, "Could You Be Murdered for Losing Weight?" Headlines screamed, "Schoolteacher murdered for weight loss." No. She was murdered by a jealous and violent man who was incapable of letting her go. He would have done this even if she hadn't lost the weight. So let's take a look at Heather's story, because she was much more than a headline and so much more than her dress size. At the time of her death, Heather lived in Germantown, Tennessee, and was in the process of divorcing her husband, Christopher Jones. If you think back to episode 1, set in Brentwood, Tennessee, Germantown is to Memphis as Brentwood is to Nashville. It's an affluent suburb, 90% white, with an extremely low crime rate and a population of around 40,000. There are 27 parks in Germantown, guaranteeing that a park is within walking distance of every single resident. And that says a lot about the town. It's wholesome, dominated by churches and civic functions. Even looking at the makeup of local government, which is led by an elected mayor, alderman, and cabinet who all work part-time. There are over 200 citizens every year that volunteer for various boards and committees who are the decision-makers for Germantown. It's a wealthy town where the median income is over $115,000 a year. Many of the residents live there and commute to Memphis. Heather Palumbo-Jones was one of these commuters. She drove about a half hour each day to teach at Fraser Achievement Elementary School. The school's student population is 96% African American. She taught underprivileged children and she loved it. It took her 10 years to realize her dream of becoming a teacher. And once she finally made it, a sea change came over her. She stepped outside of her comfort zone to make some real changes in her life. And what did she need to change? Well, physically, she was morbidly obese, but this was a symptom of a more pressing problem in her life: her marriage. Christopher Jones was 10 years her senior and had never found a career. More like he rarely worked. He glommed onto Heather during her early college years and never let go. Heather was born in Jacksonville, Florida in March of 1980 to parents Chris Palumbo and Pansy Swinson. According to her cousin, Diane Perry, Heather moved from Florida to Tennessee to be closer to her. They went to Memphis University together. She said after Heather met Chris at a 1999 New Year's Eve party, she was immediately enamored, finding him worldly, cultured, and experienced. He knew about wine, and he was 10 years older than her. He did not mind that she came with a little extra weight. For a sheltered, insecure young woman, he seemed like a dream. After all, real men don't care about that sort of thing, right? That may be true, but I think Chris Jones saw an innocent, gullible, and shy young woman. A young woman that would defer to him, listen to him. Hell, just pay attention to him, because he was never all that popular with the ladies. A diminutive man, Chris could appear almost effeminate. And what was he doing at a college New Year's Eve party? He would have been almost 30 years old. Probably trolling. He didn't have friends of his own, he was known as a loner, and we also know he never finished college or had a career. But Heather was smitten. Within a couple of weeks, she had moved Chris into the apartment she shared with Diane, who was less than pleased. Finally, in March of 2003, Diane gave her cousin an ultimatum and said either he left or both of them should go. So Heather and Chris moved out. By April, Heather was pregnant with their first child, and she and Chris married that August. She also repaired her friendship with Diane. She worked full-time while also finishing college. It took her 10 years to get her bachelor's degree doing it this way. Again, Chris never established a career of his own. He stayed home with the children, obsessed with playing video games. Her son Connor was born not long after Ava, and Chris justified his laziness with care of the children while she worked and studied. If he had gotten a job, she could have finished school faster. She probably would have felt more fulfilled. But as it was, she grew increasingly unhappy and her weight ballooned. Court records reveal that over the 8 years of their marriage, Heather put on about 150 pounds. Diane, Heather's cousin, told Dateline NBC that Heather and Chris were very into online gaming, and she put on 250 pounds in little over a year. I'm not saying her cousin is outright lying, but it doesn't match what Heather herself reported. I think the 150 pounds in a year is more plausible, though that is still an extreme amount for 1 year. It's more likely this was gradual over a few years. Dateline also said she tipped the scales at 400 pounds. But in just 18 months, she was down to about 150, so Dateline would be off by about 100 pounds. It probably seems strange to you that I'm nitpicking the numbers. She was obese. She lost weight. What difference does it make? Well, it makes a lot of difference if you're exaggerating for the cameras or blasting it in a headline. Heather worked very hard to lose the weight, and there is no denying her transformation. But I feel that her cousin and friends went overboard in the press. They made all the rounds on local news, then daytime talk shows before the Dateline episode. Diane also told Dateline that Chris really loved Heather and made her feel beautiful. She also said it wasn't until Heather graduated from college that she really felt motivated to lose the weight, and when she did, everything in her marriage changed. This is in direct contradiction to court records which reveal that Chris had many affairs and Heather had often talked about leaving him. She just never really found the courage until she started putting her health first. She had never been a thin girl to begin with and had yo-yo dieted most of her life. However, once she finally graduated from college, she became very serious about her diet and exercise. She wanted a different life, not just a different body. She began exercising, specifically dance aerobics, where she made many new friends and started regaining her confidence. If the scales truly didn't matter to Chris, then wouldn't he be glad that she was healthier and happier with herself? No, he wouldn't, because like I said, she wasn't just trying to change her body, she was trying to change her life. And he knew it. He could control Fat Heather. He could also cheat on Fat Heather, and she wouldn't leave. This new, galvanized woman was her own person. A woman named Blair would testify that Heather had taught her children, and they had known each other for a while, but didn't become close until 2010 when Heather started working out and also making time for friends. I think that is another very valid point. It wasn't just the weight loss. Heather was no longer isolated. Chris never had friends of his own, and now he was jealous that she spent time with her friends instead of him. By early 2012, Heather was ready to leave Chris. Her cousin Diane even helped her start making plans. But Chris talked her into going to counseling with their minister, and so she did try for a while. But by the summer of 2012, Heather had gotten her own bank account. She was starting to make plans to leave, and she was devoted to her dance class, going several nights a week. Even though she had lost most of the weight, she was committed to staying in shape, and she was also really having fun for the first time in a long time. And her transformation was remarkable. I will have photos up on my social media, and you can see the delight and pride in her eyes, the confidence with her new slim figure, and yes, her hopeful face. But while she did have so much hope, she was also under a great deal of stress. A friend and colleague named Jessica testified to the behavior she saw Heather endure. In October of 2012, she went with Heather to drop off the kids at home because they were going to the gym together. She said Chris immediately began screaming that Heather was a bitch for making him do everything, that he was sick of being Mr. Mom. I mean, he could get a job if he resented being with the kids so much, but then he wouldn't have anything to hold over Heather's head, would he? Jessica also testified that Chris came with Heather to their work Christmas party in 2012. She said that Heather was dancing with her friends and having a good time when she saw Chris walk over to her, grab her arm, and start berating her. He screamed at her, telling her she was embarrassing him by leaving himself to the party. Jessica said, as usual, Heather's entire demeanor just deflated. And also, that Thanksgiving before this, the whole Jones family had shown up at her friend Blair's house. They had been over there the year before, but this time Blair hadn't invited them. Blair didn't turn them away, though she knew what was going on in their marriage. She said the dinner was palpable with tension. Blair later testified that Heather stopped by the following day to tell her she was moving to a rental home as soon as she could. She was done. And she did finally move out. On New Year's Day of 2013, her cousin Diane later testified about this time in Heather's life. She said that Heather was very fearful of Chris, but she was also very happy. But Chris was surprised and angry that she left, and she didn't just move, she immediately filed for divorce. It's not surprising a selfish narcissist would be shocked that his wife would actually leave him. And he was not going to make it easy for her. He knew where her new house was, and he came over unannounced all the time. Chris also wanted full custody of their children, but Heather got him to compromise temporarily until the divorce was final. Ava came to live with her, while Connor stayed with Chris. Some parents might find this unusual, but Heather was trying to keep the peace. Heather was also confident that Chris would never hurt the children, that he would never lay a hand on them. And if he at least had one child still living with him, it might take some of the pressure off of her. But it didn't. He often showed up at the school where Heather taught, bearing gifts and flowers, begging her to come home. He even serenaded her. He embarrassed her. All of her friends knew she wanted a harmonious divorce and was working hard to keep things civil. But Chris wouldn't let her go. He would not take no for an answer. He was emotionally manipulative and rarely gave her a moment's peace. Heather got an order of protection after they had a physical altercation over a cell phone, but Chris ignored it. He showed up when he wanted to. He would even guilt trip her that he couldn't get a job because the order of protection was on his record. Jessica later testified that she saw text messages and heard voicemails from Chris Jones to Heather. She said some were pleading with Heather to take him back, but others, especially the text messages, were very aggressive, with Chris screaming in all caps, "You're a heartless bitch for doing this to us. Our kids are going to hate you. I'm not going to let you get away with leaving me." Jessica said Chris texted and called Heather relentlessly throughout the school day. She also saw him show up on Valentine's Day to Heather's classroom, and Heather calmly asked him to leave. Jessica also saw Chris lurking near Heather's car in the parking lot on multiple occasions. She said Heather just tried to ignore it. Another friend named Dara testified that Heather told her that Chris had thrown her to the ground and choked her. This was in the fall of 2012, before she finally left him. Heather also told her principal the same story. He testified that she feared for her life and told him if she ever went missing, Chris was to blame. Most of us in true crime know that choking is a serious indicator of escalation in domestic violence. When I covered the Ashley Scott case in episode 5, it broke my heart how many people knew that her husband had choked her before. But many people are just not aware of what it means. They consider it a part of the regular abuse. And to be honest, friends can grow weary or jaded. It's sad to say, but it's true. You can counsel your friend to leave, but you can't make her. I think sometimes this is why our friends don't report what they know. Because if they reported the abuse and you don't leave, they may have put you in more danger. It's a very slippery slope, and I don't want to seem like I'm blaming her friends for her murder. I'm just not a fan of their behavior in the media after her death. At this time, I'm going to pause for a commercial break. Heather's friend Blair saw her at the Rock and Romp Family Music Festival in April of 2013, shortly before her murder. Chris was also at the festival with the children, though they were not all together. Heather told Blair that Chris was stalking her. She also told her friend that she thought Chris had been inside her house when she wasn't there, and that he had broken into her house the night before and stolen her phone. She couldn't prove it, but it was her gut feeling. On Friday, before Heather disappeared, she told her friend Jessica that she had woken up around 4 or 5 a.m. and thought she heard footsteps. She thought Ava was going to the bathroom, so she went back to sleep. When she woke up, it was without the alarm, but she woke at her normal time anyway. She immediately noticed her phone was missing. That email I read you in the opening was what she sent to her cousin Diane once she got to work that day. Heather had been afraid before. She had been exasperated and often embarrassed. But this feeling was new. It was a violation. She slept with her phone right next to her in the bed. Imagine how scary that is. Someone in your house and manages to get your phone almost literally out of your hands as you're sleeping, completely vulnerable. What scared her more than anything was that he had deleted her emails, all of her correspondence with her lawyer and intimate emails to her mother. He had read them all. The week before, Chris had skipped a scheduled hearing in their divorce proceedings. It was the hearing to formalize their custody agreement. Chris wanted full custody. I imagine not just as a control on Heather, but also so he could collect child support. Remember, the deadbeat still didn't work. The hearing was rescheduled for the following week. Heather was already anticipating that she would be awarded full custody. Her lawyer, Bill Bruce, was very confident. It wasn't just that she was the provider. Chris's behavior since she had filed for divorce was disturbing, and Heather was also alleging that he often left the children unattended. The next Monday, Jessica said her friend was stoic, yet bland. She thought she was scared and said that was kind of unlike her. Despite all the drama Chris had caused for her, Heather was always a very positive, sunny person. School started at 8 a.m., but she was there by 6:30. She loved her job. She loved her students, and she loved her colleagues. And Jessica could tell that she was very upset that Monday. She asked her friend if she was okay, and Heather told her that Chris had come to her house that weekend and tapped on the windows, telling the kids to let him in the house. Heather was furious and made him leave. But Heather told Jessica that she wouldn't report it because they had another court date that Friday and she didn't want to, quote, wake the sleeping beast, and would rather play it calm. That was the last time that any of her friends saw her. On Monday evening, she texted her dance instructor that she wouldn't be at class. When her instructor texted back later to say they had missed her in class, Heather responded, "Had to nap. I am getting no sleep. Afraid Chris is lurking. Lawyer says it's stalking." On Tuesday, April 16th, the school administration called her cousin Diane worried because Heather hadn't shown up for work. Heather would never just not show up. If she was sick, she would arrange a substitute and call her boss. But even that was very rare. And oddly enough, Ava and Connor were in class. They attended the same elementary school where she taught. The school security officer and Diane went to Heather's house and got in with a key from her mother. There was no sign of Heather, but her bed looked slept in, and though her car was in the driveway, her purse was missing. When officers went back to check Chris's house, he didn't answer the door. A couple of hours later, they came back, and a police officer later testified that Chris seemed almost irritated that they were there and just asked if she had been found. He didn't seem concerned at all. He let the officers look around his house and even showed them an email he had supposedly gotten from Heather that read, "Come get Ava. I cannot face everyone with this. Please forgive me. It is too much. Please raise them to remember me as their loving mommy." The email was dated April 15th and came in at 11:52 p.m. Since Chris had never reported this, and his behavior was so off-putting as one cop put it, the police were immediately suspicious and asked Chris to come in for questioning. He agreed and followed them in his own car. At the police station, Chris claimed he had no idea where Heather was or what could have happened to her. He also gave police permission to search his phone. They found a series of texts to Heather starting at around 1:30 a.m. on the day she disappeared. The first one read, "Please call me. I'm freaking out. I can't and never wanted to do this alone. I only wanted 50-50. Please don't do something foolish." At 1:49 a.m. he wrote, "Please call me. I love you so much. I didn't want this. I only wanted to let you know I was going to protect your secret and let my kids be taken from me. We can stop this and come together." At 2:25 a.m. he wrote, "I'm begging you, please, for the love of God, don't do this. The kids need you. I need you. I will do anything so long as I can stay in their lives." 3 minutes later, he wrote, "I promise I won't tell anybody. As far as I'm concerned, it never happened. I just want equality. Please, my love, please call me." And that was it until 1:30 that afternoon when he wrote, "You have the police interviewing me because I gave you the benefit of the doubt." I don't think it could be any more obvious what he was trying to do here. He was trying to make it look as though Heather had killed herself. And I'm sure you're wondering what he's getting at, what Heather would be so ashamed of. She had recently begun talking to an old flame. Heather and a man named Edward Rollerson dated in the early 90s when she was just in middle school. Though she moved to Tennessee and he moved to Virginia, the two had always kept in touch. Ed had even met Chris before. In 2003, 10 years earlier, he was coming through Memphis with his girlfriend and they all met for dinner. So he and Heather had kept up a friendly relationship for years. Then in March 2013, he messaged her wishing her a happy birthday. He found out what all had been happening in her life and the two kept messaging. Ed was now living in Johnson City, Tennessee, though that was still over 7 hours from Germantown. And in the 3 weeks leading up to Heather's death, the two were texting and talking every day. Their friendship had definitely turned flirtatious. They planned to meet in person that May. She told Ed what had finally made her leave her husband, and it wasn't just because she had lost weight and was moving on personally. Looking at Heather's Facebook profile, she still seemed to be happy at times with her husband, even after she had lost the weight. One selfie of her Roosevelt figure she captioned, "Date night." This was in early 2012. Though, of course, we do show our best face on social media. But this wasn't just a case of a woman dropping weight and changing her personality. No, as I mentioned earlier, Chris had many affairs over the years. Before she walked out on him on New Year's Day of 2013, she had looked through his phone while he was in the shower and found a bunch of explicit texts with someone named Max. She said that Chris caught her with the phone and tackled her to the ground, slamming her face into the floor. Heather also told her friends about this incident. He held her down until he pried the phone out of her hand. It was this incident that was the final straw. They had been fighting for over a year. They had tried counseling, but he was becoming increasingly violent and evidently still cheating on her. Heather also told Ed all about Chris's stalking. She started calling Ed and keeping him on the phone if Chris showed up at her house. In court, Ed testified that on the day Heather's phone went missing, he texted her good morning and she texted back something more sexually explicit than she normally would have. He thought it was odd, but this was a new relationship. It had only been a couple of weeks, so he said he went along with it, only to talk to Heather that weekend and find out it wasn't her. Chris had answered his text. Now Ed was on high alert. On April 15th, the night she went missing, Ed said he and Heather had been texting when she suddenly just sent the word shot. He figured she probably meant shit and was immediately concerned, so he called her. He heard her screaming, "Chris, get out. You need to go." And then he heard Chris say he just needed 2 minutes of her time, to which Heather responded, "It's always 2 minutes with you. 2 minutes is never enough. You need to go. You need to get out now." Ed heard Chris plead that it was a matter of life and death. He said Heather finally relented and that she would give him the 2 minutes, but she asked Ed to call her back in exactly 2 minutes. He did, and she answered, but he said she sounded angry, not scared, and told him she would call him back. But she never did, and he fell asleep. The next morning, he opened a Facebook message from Heather that read, "He knows everything. I can't believe I was such a fool. I'm taking the money I have and I'm leaving. I can't bear this. It's too much. All my friends and family are going to realize the truth and I will never be able to get them to trust me again. I'm sorry I did this to you. I should have backed out with you when I had the chance. You have been wonderful during these past few months and I hope we meet again someday. For now, I have to say goodbye. I wish nothing but the best for you. Goodbye." Ed also noticed that he had been blocked from her Facebook account. Though he felt foolish about being duped by Chris's sexual text before, he knew that this long message didn't sound like Heather, and he also knew they hadn't been dating for months. It was only a couple of weeks. So he said he kept trying to call and text her, but she wouldn't answer. He learned on Facebook a little later in the day that she was missing, and he contacted police to tell them everything he knew. At the station that first day, Chris did not buckle under 4 hours of questioning. He had an excuse for everything. The scratches on his arms were from playing with his dog. And of course, he had the suicidal email he claimed was from Heather and his text messages. He probably thought he was pretty smart. He even admitted he was at Heather's house the night before. He told the police he was trying to have a conversation with his wife to settle custody because they didn't have the money to go to court. He also claimed that after he got the email from Heather, he returned to the house, went to the back door, which he said was unlocked. He said he went upstairs and carried their sleeping daughter out of the house, all without speaking to Heather again. He then said he took Ava home and put her in bed and went back to Heather's house. He said this time it was locked up and dark, so he left. The reason he probably said this is because he was seen at a gas station right down the road around 11:30 p.m. and also stopped at a Walgreens. He knew witnesses could possibly identify him. But police say during the questioning he appeared to be stable and calm. He was allowed to leave, and the next day, the police came with a search warrant. They seized his computer, 4 hard drives, a laptop, and 2 Bibles open to the Book of Malachi. The Book of Malachi has several interpretations and meanings, but probably the most important to Chris was Malachi's opposition to divorce. It would seem Chris wanted people to believe he was turning to Scripture during this trying time. "For I hate divorce, says the Lord," chapter 2, verse 16. And also, "Return to me, and I will return to you," chapter 3, verse 7. For the next week, police tried to contact Chris Jones but were unsuccessful. Finally, on April 23rd, after knocking on his door repeatedly, the apartment manager came out and said that she had seen Chris walking his dog about a half hour before. He finally came around the corner, but said he had a job interview and didn't have time to talk. He promised to come to the station that afternoon. While they were waiting, detectives put a tracking device on his car to make sure they didn't lose him. They didn't have enough evidence to arrest him. Chris came to the station as promised. This time, his story changed a bit. He admitted that the scratches on his arm were from a fight with Heather, though he still denied killing her. He said that they were fighting for her cell phone. As he was talking, police had a cadaver dog go out to the parking lot, and the dog picked out Chris's car immediately. When detectives told him about the cadaver dog, Chris insisted that he sometimes picked up dead animals and put them in his trunk. When the detectives explained that the dog was trained to pick up only human cadavers, Chris broke down. Through tears, Chris claimed that he and Heather fought on the night of the 15th. She lost her footing on the top step leading out to the carport and hit her head. He said he tried to revive her but couldn't, so he took his daughter and left. He said he put Ava to bed and then came back and cleaned up the blood and put Heather's body in his trunk. He told the detectives that he had put her body in the back of a pickup truck that was parked on Stage Road. Officers were dispatched but found no truck, and again Chris was confronted with his lies. He now said that he had put her body next to a small creek and that he had wanted to give her a Viking burial, so he lit her body on fire using leaves and gasoline. Chris was arrested and search teams began combing the area he had indicated, but they had no luck. The next day, on April 24th, Chris asked to speak with a detective. He was crying and said he needed to get something off his chest. He said he had lied before and that Heather had actually committed suicide. He said that when he went back to the house, he found that Heather had hung herself. He claimed he had originally lied to protect Heather's image so their children wouldn't know she killed herself. He also said he was protecting their marital covenant. He then gave more detailed instructions on where her body was, and finally, after dark on April 25th, in a thickly forested area in Shelby County, the police recovered a badly charred human body. Heather Palumbo-Jones was tentatively identified through dental records and then positively identified by DNA. Her autopsy was performed by the Nashville medical examiner. Her body was so severely burned and decomposed that it only weighed 70 pounds. Most of her extremities were gone, either carried off by animals or actually burned away. But Chris did say he had wrapped her body in an inflatable mattress and tied it with bungee cords. One of these cords was found near her body and had her DNA on it. But the medical examiner could make an opinion on her cause of death. Her hyoid bone was broken, and there were fractures on both sides of her neck. The ME said those injuries are common with strangulation, either manually or with a ligature. And this would explain why Chris said she hung herself. If she was found and there was an autopsy, he was smart enough to know that there might be signs of strangulation. But crime scene investigators using luminol also found Heather's blood all over her house. In the living room carpet, on her kitchen floor, and on clothes found in her car. Although Chris gave different stories about Heather's murder, he never really told the truth. We don't really know what happened to Heather, though it is safe to say she was strangled. But with all the blood found in her home, it would seem that Heather put up a hell of a fight. And this is consistent to what we know about Heather in the last weeks of her life. She was angry, and she was scared, but she was also resolved. She was not going to back down to him. She was going to see this through and gain custody of her children. And Chris Jones couldn't let that happen. Considering that he stole her phone just 5 days earlier, her murder seemed premeditated. Maybe he just took it to stalk her, but conveniently, he was able to send himself an email from Heather's account setting up the story of her suicide. The jury agreed. In April of 2015, Christopher Jones was convicted of first-degree premeditated murder, and then in March he was found guilty of abuse of a corpse. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole, with 2 additional years for the second charge. Naturally, both sentences made headlines locally, but the abuse of a corpse charge really got the media involved. And when they learned of Heather's recent weight loss, the stories got really ugly. Headlines screamed, "Weight loss got teacher killed." What did she do to bring about her gruesome demise? Asked Cyberbreeze.com. They called Chris a successful businessman and characterized their marriage as happy. Quote, after years of being fed up, pun intended, with her body and being overweight, Heather began a serious diet and exercise plan. For most people, losing weight is the start of an exciting and life-changing journey. For Heather Palumbo-Jones, however, it set her and her family on a path towards utter destruction. This is the very definition of victim blaming, and it's pandering clickbait for sure. But it wasn't just shitty websites no one's ever heard of. As I said earlier, her friends made the talk show circuit rounds. They appeared on the Dr. Oz show in an episode titled, Could You Be Murdered for Losing Weight? And then they appeared on Dateline. Do you think Heather would still be alive if she didn't go through this transformation? Asked Andrea Canning of Dateline. Her friends paused, looked around awkwardly, but agreed. But this wasn't true. Heather and Chris had marital problems for years, and even before she lost the weight, most of these problems stemmed from Chris's refusal to get a job and also his many affairs. But that's not an interesting headline. It's banal. It's why many marriages end. Heather's weight loss was more of a headline and certainly gets you on talk shows. Suddenly, her personal transformation is blamed for Chris's violent and murderous actions. Her decision to get healthy followed immediately after she had graduated from college. These were important goals for Heather. She dreamed of being a teacher, and she wanted to be healthy. She wanted to spend more time with her friends. She wanted to dance without getting out of breath. She wanted to run around with her children and her students. And records indicate that despite her problems with Chris, she did not leave him until New Year's of 2013, more than a year after she took off most of this weight. And it was directly related to his behavior, his cheating, his laziness, and their constant financial struggles. But as I said before, those problems don't make for salacious headlines. It's a depressingly common reason for women to leave their husbands. However, it is true that Chris did not become physically violent with Heather until she was close to leaving. And that is also depressingly common. Many controlling narcissists get violent when they realize they're losing control. But Heather Palumbo-Jones was done being controlled. She was done being lied to, done carrying the financial burden for her family, and done being cheated on. She wanted a better life. And for that reason, and that reason alone, Christopher Jones took her life. Southern Fried True Crime is written and produced by me, Erica Kelley. The original graphic art is by Coley Horner, and Southern Fried's original music is by Rob Harrison of Gamma Radio. Special thanks to Lindsey Murphy-Thomas for suggesting this case. As always, if you enjoyed the show, please tell a friend or rate and review on iTunes. You can also listen directly from Spreaker, my network online, or on their app, and I'm also on Stitcher, CastBox, and many other podcatchers. If you're interested in supporting the show, I have a Patreon page with many different rewards for different levels of donation. Or you could visit my website, southernfriedtruecrime.com, where you can make a one-time donation just by hitting the donate button. I also have a merchandise store open. Just go to whatamaneuver.net and click on Shop by Store, then search for Southern Fried True Crime. I have all sorts of t-shirts, tanks, hoodies, and even onesies for babies. You can find links to Patreon and my merch shop in the show notes. If you have any comments, corrections, or suggestions, you can email me at southernfriedtruecrime@gmail.com. I love hearing from you guys, and I'm always looking for new cases, so please feel free to reach out. I'm also all over social media. Just search the show name in Facebook or Instagram. And my Twitter handle is South Fried Truth. If you're interested in discussing Heather's case or any other episodes further, come check out my discussion group. It is linked to my Southern Fried True Crime Facebook page. And we don't just discuss cases. We share memes, make friends, and even debate Southern pronunciations. Until next time, thanks so much for listening. Y'all take care.